Her ex-boyfriend mocked her job. The Russian boss's convoy pulled up and silenced him. Vanessa had learned to ignore the looks. Working as a driver for an executive car service meant swallowing pride, smiling through condescension, and pretending not to notice when people treated her like furniture. She was good at her job, better than most, and that had to be enough. The pay covered her rent in Brooklyn, her mother's medical bills, and the online courses she took at night. She told herself that was what mattered, not the way some passengers spoke to her like she was invisible, or worse, like she was less than human. It was a Wednesday afternoon when everything changed. She was parked outside a luxury hotel in Midtown, waiting for her next pickup, scrolling through her phone when she heard the voice that made her stomach drop. Marcus. Her ex-boyfriend. The one who had promised her the world 3 years ago, then left her the moment his tech startup got acquired. She hadn't seen him since, and she'd been perfectly fine with that arrangement. He was walking out of the hotel with 2 other men in expensive suits, all laughter and confidence, the kind of men who believed the world bent to their will because, so far, it had. Vanessa slid lower in her seat, praying he wouldn't notice her, but luck had never been her friend. Marcus stopped mid-stride, his eyes landing on her black sedan with the company logo on the door. Recognition dawned on his face, followed by something worse. Amusement. He walked over, his friends trailing behind, their grins already forming. Vanessa rolled down the window because refusing would only make it worse. Marcus leaned against her car like he owned it, like he owned her, that familiar smirk playing on his lips. Vanessa? Wow. So this is what you're doing now? His voice carried across the street, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Driving people around? I mean, I knew you didn't have much ambition, but damn. His friends laughed. One of them said something about how lucky Marcus was to have upgraded. Vanessa's hands tightened on the steering wheel, her nails digging into the leather. She wanted to say something cutting, something that would wipe that smug expression off his face, but the words stuck in her throat. This was her job. These were potential clients. She couldn't afford to make a scene, and Marcus knew it. He'd always known exactly how to corner her. You know what the sad part is? Marcus continued, warming to his audience. You could have had something. I offered to bring you into the company, remember? But you had your pride, your independence. He said the words like they were insults. Now look at you. A driver. Basically a taxi service for rich people. Must be so fulfilling. Something hot and sharp twisted in Vanessa's chest. She was about to respond, to say anything, when she heard it. The low rumble of engines, multiple engines, moving in perfect synchronization. 4 black SUVs turned onto the street, their windows tinted so dark they looked like moving shadows. They moved with military precision, forming a convoy that commanded attention without asking for it. Traffic seemed to part instinctively. Even Marcus stopped talking, his head turning toward the approaching vehicles. The convoy slowed as it passed, and then, impossibly, it stopped. Right there. Right in front of Vanessa's car. The street went silent. Even the ambient noise of the city seemed to hold its breath. The rear door of the second SUV opened, and a man stepped out. Vanessa felt her breath catch. He was tall, easily 6'3", with dark hair touched with silver at the temples. His suit probably cost more than she made in 6 months, tailored so precisely it looked like armor. But it was his presence that struck her, the way he moved with absolute certainty, like gravity itself adjusted to accommodate him. Alexander Yermakov didn't need to announce himself. Everyone with eyes and a sense of self-preservation knew what he was. Power radiated from him like heat from asphalt in summer, undeniable and dangerous. He walked toward Vanessa's car with measured steps, his security detail fanning out with practiced efficiency. His eyes, cold and gray as winter steel, swept over Marcus and his friends with the kind of assessment that made grown men reconsider their life choices. Then his gaze landed on Vanessa, and something shifted. The coldness remained, but beneath it, she caught something else. Curiosity, maybe. Recognition of some kind, though they'd never met. He stopped at her window, tall enough that she had to look up to meet his eyes, and when he spoke, his accent was slight but unmistakable, refined by years of conducting business in multiple languages. "You are Vanessa." It wasn't a question. "I have been looking for you." Her mind went blank. This man, this obviously powerful and dangerous man, knew her name. Had been looking for her. None of it made sense. Marcus had gone pale, backing away with his friends, suddenly very interested in being somewhere else. Alexander didn't even glance at them. They were beneath his notice, insects too insignificant to acknowledge. "I need a driver," he continued, his voice low and measured. "Someone reliable. Discreet. Someone who knows this city and does not ask unnecessary questions. You were recommended." Vanessa's mouth opened, closed. "I work for a company," she managed. "I can't just. I have spoken with your employer." He pulled out a business card, held it between two fingers. "You will call this number tomorrow. The arrangements have been made. Your contract with them is concluded. You work for me now." He said it like it was already decided, like her agreement was a formality he was extending out of politeness rather than necessity. "The pay is triple what you currently make. Benefits included. You start Monday." Every instinct told her to refuse. Men like him didn't make offers, they made demands disguised as opportunities. Working for someone this powerful, this obviously connected to things she didn't want to understand, was asking for trouble. But triple her salary meant her mother's treatment, meant no more 60-hour weeks, meant maybe, finally, breathing room. And there was something in his eyes, something that made her think refusing wasn't really an option anyway. "What if I say no?" she asked, knowing the answer but needing to hear it. The corner of his mouth lifted, not quite a smile. "Then I will ask again tomorrow. And the day after. I am very persistent when I want something, Vanessa. It is one of my more charming qualities." He placed the card on her dashboard. Monday. 8 a.m. This address. He turned to leave, then paused, finally looking at Marcus, who was trying to blend into the hotel facade. "You should choose your words more carefully. Not everyone is as patient as she is." It was said quietly, almost conversationally, but Marcus flinched like he'd been struck. Then Alexander Yermakov walked back to his SUV, his security detail moving like a choreographed dance, and the convoy pulled away with the same precise coordination it had arrived with. The streets slowly came back to life, sound and motion resuming as if released from a spell. Vanessa sat frozen, her hands still on the wheel, the business card burning on her dashboard like it might catch fire. Marcus and his friends were already gone, disappeared into the hotel without another word. Her phone buzzed. A text from her company supervisor. "We've been contacted by a private client requesting your exclusive services. Contract terminated effective immediately with 2-month severance. Congratulations." She should have been angry. She should have felt manipulated, trapped. Instead, all she felt was the dangerous flutter of curiosity and the even more dangerous awareness that her life had just been tilted off its axis by a man whose name she'd only learned 5 minutes ago. Monday seemed very far away and much too close. The weekend passed in a blur of second-guessing and practical preparation. Vanessa researched Alexander Yermakov and found almost nothing, which told her everything. Men that powerful didn't leave digital footprints. They had people to ensure their privacy, their secrets, their very existence remained carefully curated. What little she found were business articles mentioning his import-export company, his real estate holdings, his philanthropic contributions to children's hospitals and arts programs. Nothing concrete. Nothing real. Just the carefully constructed facade of a legitimate businessman. Monday morning arrived with gray skies and the kind of cold that cut through layers. Vanessa dressed carefully, professional but not trying too hard, and drove to the address on the card. It was a private garage in Tribeca, unmarked and secured behind gates that opened automatically as she approached. Inside, the SUV from Wednesday was waiting, gleaming black and immaculate. A man in a dark suit, built like he bench-pressed refrigerators for cardio, handed her a key fob and a phone. Mr. Yermakov's schedule is on the phone. You take him where it says. You wait where it says. You speak to no one about what you see or hear. Understood? She understood. She understood she was stepping into something that couldn't be undone with a 2-week notice and a polite resignation letter. But she took the keys anyway, and when Alexander emerged from the private elevator at precisely 8 a.m., she was ready. He slid into the back seat without comment, already focused on his own phone, and she pulled out into traffic, beginning what would become a strange and intoxicating routine. The first week, he barely spoke to her beyond destinations. She learned his patterns, his preferences. He drank his coffee black, took calls in Russian and English and occasionally Italian, and never, ever showed emotion during business dealings. She learned which restaurants to wait at, which buildings had private entrances, which associates warranted the full security detail and which meetings he took alone. She learned that he was punctual to the point of obsession, that he never forgot a name or a face, and that people feared him for reasons that went unspoken but hung heavy in every interaction. She also learned that he was watching her. Not obviously, not in a way that felt threatening, but she could feel his attention during the quiet moments between stops. Sometimes she'd catch his eyes in the rearview mirror, studying her with that same intense focus he applied to everything. It should have made her uncomfortable. Instead, it made her hyper-aware, made her sit straighter, drive smoother, like she was being evaluated and desperately wanted to pass a test she didn't understand. The second week, he started talking. Small things at first. You drive well. Better than the last 3 they sent me. Then, you are not afraid. Most people are afraid. And once, after a particularly tense meeting that had his security detail on high alert, you did not panic when those men approached. Why? She'd answered honestly. Panicking doesn't help. It just makes things worse. He'd made a sound that might have been approval, and she'd felt absurdly pleased. By the 3rd week, the barrier between them had started to erode in ways she couldn't quite define. He began asking about her life, questions that felt like reconnaissance disguised as conversation. Where did she grow up? What did she study? Why driving? She answered carefully, revealing just enough to satisfy curiosity without exposing vulnerability. But he was skilled at reading between lines, at hearing what wasn't said. When she mentioned her mother's illness casually, dismissively, he'd gone quiet. The next day, an envelope appeared in her bag. Inside was a check and a note with the name of a medical specialist. She will see her. This Thursday. No arguments. Vanessa should have returned it. Should have drawn a line, maintained distance. Instead, she'd stared at that check, at the amount that would cover 6 months of treatment, and felt something dangerous crack open in her chest. It wasn't just gratitude. It was the terrifying realization that this man, this undeniably dangerous man, had paid attention. Had cared, in whatever capacity someone like him was capable of caring. When she tried to thank him, he'd waved it away. You are useful to me. Useful people should not be distracted by preventable problems. It is practical, nothing more. But his eyes had said something different. His eyes had said he'd seen her worry, her exhaustion, the weight she carried, and had decided to carry some of it for her. That was when Vanessa understood she was in trouble of an entirely different kind. The walls came down slowly, like ice melting under persistent sun. Alexander started staying in the front seat during longer drives, claiming he needed to work on his laptop and the back seat gave him a headache. She suspected it was a lie but didn't challenge it. With him beside her, the conversations deepened. He told her about Moscow, about growing up in a world where trust was currency and betrayal was common as breathing. He never explicitly stated what he did, what his business really involved, but she wasn't naive. The security, the deference, the carefully coded conversations she overheard, they painted a picture she didn't want to examine too closely. You could leave, he said one night, after a dinner meeting that had run late. They were parked outside his building, engine idling, the city lights reflecting off the windshield. I would give you references. Money. You could go anywhere, do anything. Why do you stay? Vanessa gripped the steering wheel, not looking at him. Maybe I don't want to leave. It was the most honest thing she'd said to him, and the most dangerous. Because it was true. Despite everything, despite knowing better, she didn't want to leave. Not the job, not the money, not the strange and growing connection between them that defied logic and good sense. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, you should want to. Most people would. His voice was rough, almost angry. I am not a good man, Vanessa. The things I have done, the things I will do, they do not earn redemption. You should be afraid of me. She finally turned to look at him, finding his eyes already on her, intense and searching. I know what you are, she said softly. I'm not stupid. But I also know you made sure my mother got the best care. That you've never been anything but respectful to me. That you trust me with parts of your life you don't trust most people with. Maybe you're not a good man by traditional standards. But you've been good to me. That counts for something. The air between them felt electric, charged with everything they weren't saying. She watched his jaw tighten, watched him wrestle with something internal. Finally, he opened the door. Good night, Vanessa. I will see you tomorrow. But before he left, his hand brushed hers on the gear shift, just for a second, just enough to send electricity up her arm and straight to her heart. You count for something too. More than you should. Then he was gone, disappeared into his building, leaving her alone with a racing pulse and the terrifying knowledge that they'd crossed some invisible line. She'd stopped being just his driver weeks ago, maybe from the very first day. And he'd stopped being just her employer. What they were becoming, she didn't have words for. But she knew it was dangerous. Knew it was inevitable. Knew there was no going back. The shift happened on a Thursday. Vanessa picked up Alexander for what should have been a routine meeting at a restaurant in the meatpacking district. He was tense, she could feel it, his usual calm replaced by something coiled and ready. Stay in the car, he'd told her, his voice harder than usual. Engine running. If I am not out in 30 minutes, you leave. Do not wait. Do not look back. Understood? She'd wanted to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped her. This was serious. More serious than the usual careful choreography of his days. She watched him walk into the restaurant with two of his men, then settled in to wait, every nerve on edge. 20 minutes passed. 25. At 28, gunshots cracked through the air, sharp and unmistakable. Her hands went to the keys, but she didn't turn them. She couldn't leave. Every instinct screamed at her to drive away, to follow his orders, but her hands wouldn't obey. Then he was there, bursting out the back exit, blood on his shirt sleeve, his face a mask of cold fury. One of his men was supporting the other, who was limping badly. Drive, Alexander barked, throwing himself into the passenger seat. Now. Queensboro Bridge. Do not stop. Vanessa drove. She drove like her life depended on it, weaving through traffic with precision born of years navigating the city, her heart hammering but her hands steady. Behind them, she could see headlights following, gaining. Alexander was on his phone, speaking rapid Russian, coordinating something. Blood was seeping through his sleeve, dripping onto the leather seat. You are hurt, she said, keeping her voice level even though she wanted to scream. It is nothing. Drive faster. She did. She took corners that made her passengers in the back swear, ran 2 red lights, and somehow, impossibly, lost the pursuing cars in the maze of Queens. When she finally pulled into a warehouse district he directed her to, surrounded immediately by more security, her hands were shaking so badly she could barely put the car in park. Alexander turned to her, his eyes searching her face. You did not leave. It was an accusation and a question and something else, something raw. I told you to leave if there was trouble. Why did you not leave? Because you weren't out yet, she said simply. I don't leave people behind. It was the truth, and they both knew it meant more than just this moment. She'd chosen, definitively and irrevocably. She'd chosen him, his world, whatever that meant. And there was no taking it back. His hand came up, cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. His palm was warm, solid, real. "You beautiful, stubborn, impossibly brave woman," he said, his accent thicker with emotion. "You should have left. You should have saved yourself." But even as he said it, his eyes were saying something different. His eyes were saying thank you, saying please don't leave, saying I need you more than I should. She leaned into his touch, her own hand coming up to cover his. "I'm not going anywhere." And she meant it. Whatever came next, whoever he was, whatever he'd done, she was staying. She'd made her choice, and looking into his eyes, seeing the vulnerability beneath the armor, she knew he'd made his too. They took him inside to deal with his wound, which turned out to be a graze, nothing serious but enough to need stitches. Vanessa waited, deflecting questions from security who couldn't quite figure out what a driver was doing acting like she belonged. When Alexander emerged, his arm bandaged but otherwise looking like nothing had happened, he took her hand. Just took it, threaded his fingers through hers like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Come. I will take you home. You have had enough for today." But he didn't take her home. He took her to his penthouse, the one she'd dropped him at dozens of times but never entered. Inside, it was all glass and steel and minimalist elegance, the kind of space that spoke of wealth so profound it didn't need to announce itself. He poured her a drink, vodka in crystal glasses, and they stood at the window looking out over the city that sparkled like scattered diamonds below. "I was set up tonight," he said quietly. "By someone I trusted. Someone close." His jaw was tight, anger and betrayal warring in his expression. "This is my world, Vanessa. Betrayal. Violence. Constant calculation. You do not belong in it. You should not want to belong in it." She took a sip of vodka, felt it burn down her throat. "Then why did you bring me here? Why not take me home like you said?" She turned to face him, needing him to hear this, to understand. "You keep telling me to leave, that I should want to leave. But you also keep pulling me closer. You can't have it both ways, Alexander. Either you want me gone, or you want me here. Which is it?" His control cracked. She saw it happen, saw the careful walls he maintained crumble under the weight of everything unspoken between them. He set down his glass and closed the distance between them in 2 strides. His hands framed her face, tilted it up to his. "I want you gone because you deserve better. I want you here because I am a selfish man who cannot let you go. I want you safe. I want you close. I want..." He stopped, his forehead pressing against hers, his breath ragged. "I want you, Vanessa. God help me, I want you in every way a man can want a woman, and it terrifies me." Her heart was thunder in her chest. "I'm already here," she whispered. "I'm already in this. You can't protect me by pushing me away. It doesn't work like that." Her hands came up to his wrists, holding him to her. "I see you, Alexander. Not the boss, not the businessman. You. And I'm not afraid." His kiss was inevitable, fierce and desperate and achingly tender all at once. He kissed her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning, like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. Vanessa melted into him, into the solid strength of his body, the overwhelming rightness of being in his arms. Everything else fell away. The danger, the uncertainty, the 1,000 reasons this was a terrible idea. None of it mattered. This mattered. He mattered. They mattered. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to hers again, his hands shaking slightly where they held her. "There is no going back from this," he said roughly. "If you stay, if we do this, you are mine. I am yours. My enemies become your enemies. My life becomes your life. It will not be easy. It will not be safe. Are you certain?" She looked into his eyes, those winter-gray eyes that had seen too much, carried too much, and found her answer in the vulnerability she saw there. This man, this powerful, dangerous man, was offering her everything he had. His protection, his loyalty, his heart. How could she refuse? "I'm certain," she said. "I choose this. I choose you." The relief in his expression nearly broke her. He pulled her close, wrapped around her like he could shield her from the world through will alone. "Then I will spend every day proving you did not make a mistake," he murmured into her hair. "I will keep you safe. I will give you everything. You will never regret choosing me." She believed him. Against all logic, against all reason, she believed him. The weeks that followed were a revelation. They kept her official role as his driver, maintaining the facade for security purposes, but everything had changed. She was no longer employee, no longer just the woman behind the wheel. She was his, acknowledged and protected with a fierceness that would have been frightening if it hadn't felt so much like coming home. Alexander's world opened to her, not all at once, but in careful layers. He introduced her to his inner circle, the men who'd been with him for years, who protected his interests and his life. They watched her with assessment in their eyes, trying to figure out what made her different, what made their boss, who trusted no one, trust her. Victor, his head of security, was the first to warm up. "You did good that night," he'd said gruffly after a meeting. "Keeping your head. Not many people could do that. He chose well." It was the closest thing to approval she was likely to get, and she'd treasured it. Slowly, piece by piece, she began to understand the structure of Alexander's organization. It was more than she'd imagined, more complex, more far-reaching. Import-export was real, but it was also camouflage. Beneath it ran networks of influence, carefully managed territories, agreements that kept peace between factions that would otherwise tear each other apart. He was careful what he told her, protective of her in ways that sometimes frustrated her. "I do not want this to touch you more than necessary," he'd explained when she'd pushed for more information. "The less you know, the safer you are. Please, Vanessa, let me keep some parts separate. Let me protect you how I can." She'd agreed, understanding the love in the request even as part of her bristled at being shielded. But she was learning that his protectiveness came from loss, from having seen too many people he cared about destroyed by his world. Their private time became sacred. In his penthouse, away from the eyes and expectations, he was different. Softer. He'd cook for her, insisting she relax while he moved around the kitchen with surprising skill, telling her stories about his grandmother in Moscow who'd taught him. He'd put on jazz, pull her into his arms, and dance with her in the living room, just swaying together while the city glittered below. He'd wake her with coffee and kisses, trace her face like he was memorizing it, tell her she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. These moments, private and perfect, became her anchor. Proof that beneath the armor was a man capable of gentleness, of love, of dreams beyond power and control. But reality always intruded. 3 months in, she started noticing things. Cars that appeared too often. People watching. A tension in Alexander's shoulders that spoke of brewing trouble. He tried to hide it from her, but she'd learned to read him too well. Finally, she confronted him. "What's happening? And don't tell me nothing. I can see it." He'd been quiet for a long time, staring out at the city. When he spoke, his voice was heavy. "There is a man. Dmitry Volkov. He believes I have taken something that belongs to him, territory he thinks he has a claim to. He is dangerous, unstable, and he is making moves. I am handling it, but it may get worse before it gets better." He turned to her, his eyes fierce. "I will not let him touch you. Whatever happens, you are protected. I have made arrangements, people who will take you somewhere safe if needed. You must promise me, if I tell you to go, you will go." She'd promised, knowing even as she said it that she wouldn't. She couldn't. Not anymore. Not when every fiber of her being was tied to this man, his life, his fate. They were bound now, for better or worse, and she'd accepted that truth weeks ago. The attack came on a rainy Tuesday. She was picking up Alexander from a meeting in Midtown when the black sedan appeared from nowhere, blocking their path. Men emerged, armed, efficient. Before she could react, Victor was there with the security detail, returning fire, screaming at her to drive now. She did, her hands ice-cold but steady, while behind her a firefight erupted. Alexander was on the phone, coordinating, his voice deadly calm even as bullets shattered the rear window. She drove to the secondary safe house, the one he'd shown her for emergencies, her mind blank with focus and terror. Inside, surrounded by security, Alexander finally let himself show strain. His hand shook as he poured vodka, drank it in one swallow. "This is escalating faster than I anticipated," he said, more to himself than her. "Volkov is making his move. He wants war." He turned to Vanessa, and the anguish in his eyes nearly destroyed her. "I need you to leave the city. Tonight. Victor will take you somewhere safe, somewhere Volkov cannot find you. You will stay there until this is finished." "No." The word came out flat, absolute. "I'm not leaving you. Vanessa, please." "No." She crossed to him, took his face in her hands, made him look at her. "You don't get to protect me by sending me away. I knew what I was choosing. I choose it again, right now. I'm staying. We face this together, or not at all." The argument that followed was fierce, both of them stubborn, both terrified for different reasons. But eventually, he capitulated, pulling her into his arms with a desperation that spoke of how close he'd been to breaking. "You will be the death of me," he murmured into her hair. "Or my salvation. I have not decided which." "Both," she said. "Probably both." The war with Volkov lasted 3 weeks. 3 weeks of safe houses and security details, of Alexander gone for hours handling things he wouldn't tell her about, of waiting and worrying and trying to be strong when all she wanted was for it to be over. She saw sides of him she'd only glimpsed before, the strategist, the commander, the man who could make decisions that would haunt him but make them anyway because they were necessary. She saw him carry the weight of lives and loyalties, saw him navigate impossible situations with a clarity that was terrifying and awe-inspiring. And through it all, he came back to her. Every night, no matter how late, how tired, how bloodied, he came back to her. She became his refuge, the place he could let down the armor, and she held him through the storms, silent and strong. The end came suddenly. Volkov overreached, made mistakes born of arrogance, and Alexander, with the careful patience of a man who understood that wars were won through strategy not fury, closed the trap. The details were kept from her, but she knew it was over when Alexander walked into the penthouse at dawn, exhaustion and relief written in every line of his body. He pulled her into his arms, buried his face in her neck, and just held her, trembling slightly with the release of tension he'd been carrying for weeks. "It is finished," he said hoarsely. "Volkov is no longer a threat. It is finished." She held him tighter, felt her own tears slip free. They'd survived. Against odds and danger and everything that had tried to tear them apart, they'd survived. When he finally lifted his head, his eyes were red-rimmed but clear. "I want to give you something," he said, pulling back slightly. From his pocket, he withdrew a small box. Inside was a ring, simple and elegant, a single diamond that caught the morning light. "This is not a cage. This is not ownership. This is a promise. That I will love you, protect you, stand with you for as long as you will have me. Vanessa, will you marry me? Will you choose this life, knowing everything it means, and let me choose you every day for the rest of mine?" The yes came easy. Easiest thing she'd ever said. Because somewhere between being hired and being held at gunpoint, between dancing in living rooms and surviving gang wars, she'd fallen completely, irrevocably in love with this complicated, dangerous, tender man. He slipped the ring on her finger, kissed her like she was precious, like she was everything, and Vanessa felt the future unfold before them, uncertain but theirs. 6 months later, they married in a small ceremony, just his inner circle and her mother, who'd recovered beautifully under the specialist's care. It wasn't a fairy tale. There would be more challenges, more dangers, more moments where the life he led would crash into the life they were building. But they faced it together, and that made all the difference. Vanessa kept driving him, kept being his partner in every sense, and slowly, carefully, they built something real in the spaces between power plays and business deals. They built a home. A life. A love that refused to be anything less than extraordinary. And when people asked her, years later, if she regretted it, regretted choosing a man like Alexander Yermakov, she always smiled. Because the truth was simple and absolute. She'd choose him again. Every single time. In every version of events, in every possible universe, she'd choose him. Because love, real love, wasn't about safety or certainty. It was about finding someone who saw you, truly saw you, and chose to stand beside you anyway. And she'd found that. Against all odds, in the most unlikely of places, with the most impossible of men. She'd found home. Hey, loves. Thank you so much for staying with me through Vanessa and Alexander's story. I know it was a journey, one with danger and intensity and maybe some moments where you held your breath wondering how it would end. I hope it touched you the way it touched me while writing it. This story kept me up at night, honestly. The idea of someone like Vanessa, just trying to live her life with dignity, running into someone like Alexander and having everything change in an instant. That moment when your whole world tilts and you have to decide whether to run or stay, whether to choose safety or choose something that might destroy you but might also make you whole. That's powerful stuff. I wanted to show you a love that wasn't easy, that wasn't clean or simple, but was real. The kind where two people from completely different worlds find something in each other that they can't walk away from. Where they choose each other despite everything, or maybe because of everything. Where strength meets strength, and vulnerability meets vulnerability, and somehow, impossibly, it works. What did you think? Did Vanessa's choice resonate with you? Did you feel Alexander's struggle between wanting to protect her and needing her close? I'd love to hear what moments hit you hardest, what parts made you feel something deep. Drop a comment and tell me. Did you root for them? Did you believe in them? I really want to know. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for letting me share this story with you. You all mean more than you know. Until next time, my loves. Stay strong. Choose love, even when it's scary. Especially when it's scary. All my heart.